I still remember the sound my heels made on the marble floor that night, sharp and too loud in the silence. It was past 11 when I pushed open the front door of our brownstone in Beacon Hill. The rain had followed me inside, dripping from my coat onto the rug. I called out his name the way I always did, half expecting the quick patter of small feet and the sleepy voice of our 4-year-old asking if I brought him anything from the city. Marcus. Nothing. The house felt wrong, like someone had turned the volume down on our whole life. No warm light in the kitchen, no half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, no faint scent of the chamomile tea he drank every evening. I walked deeper in, switching on lamps as I went, and that was when I saw it. A single white envelope centered on the granite island, my name written in his careful, left-slanted handwriting. My fingers were already cold when I picked it up. Inside were the divorce papers. Signed. Dated that same day. No note. No explanation. Just his signature at the bottom, like a quiet period at the end of 7 years. I stood there for a long minute, the pages trembling in my hands. Then I ran. Upstairs first. Our bedroom closet hung open, half his shirts gone. The small duffel bag we kept for weekend trips was missing from the top shelf. In Theo's room, the bed was neatly made, but his favorite stuffed fox, the one with the worn ear he refused to let me mend, was nowhere on the pillow. The nightlight shaped like a lighthouse still glowed softly, but the room felt hollow. I called Marcus's phone until the automated voice told me the number was no longer in service. I called his sister, his 2 closest friends from college, even a principal at the high school where he taught history. No one had heard from him. By 3 in the morning, I was sitting on the cold kitchen floor with my back against the island, staring at the papers like they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. At dawn, the doorbell rang. I opened it still in yesterday's dress, eyes swollen. My mother stood on the top step in a charcoal coat, raindrops glistening on her shoulders like tiny diamonds. She didn't wait for an invitation. She walked past me into the living room, glanced once at the envelope still lying on the island, and let out a slow breath. "So he finally did it," she said, voice even almost bored. I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She turned, removing her gloves 1 finger at a time. "Men like Marcus always leave when the novelty wears off, Elena. He was never going to stay." "Not really." My stomach twisted. "He took Theo. He'll bring the boy back eventually. Or he won't. Either way, you have a company to run." She picked up the papers, scanning them with the same detached expression she used on quarterly reports. "Sign these. The sooner you put this chapter behind you, the sooner you can focus on what matters." I felt the words like ice water down my spine. "He's my husband." "He was," she corrected, setting the documents down again. "Now he's a complication you no longer need." I didn't answer. I simply took the papers, folded them once, and slid them into the drawer beneath the island. The sound of wood sliding shut seemed final, but not in the way she wanted. My mother watched me for a long moment, her eyes narrowing the way they did when a deal was slipping away from her. "You're embarrassing yourself, Elena. And you're embarrassing the family name." I met her gaze without blinking. "I'm not signing anything until I understand why." She gave a small, pitying smile, the kind that had closed million-dollar negotiations and ended friendships in the same breath. "You'll regret this stubbornness. But suit yourself. Just remember, empires aren't built by chasing ghosts." She left without another word, the click of the front door echoing through the empty house. That was the beginning of 7 months that felt like drowning in slow motion. I kept the brownstone exactly as it was, Theo's drawings still taped to the fridge, Marcus's coffee mug still in the sink the morning he left. Every night, I lay awake listening for the sound of keys in the lock that never came. During the day, I sat in boardrooms, closed 8-figure deals, smiled for photographs, all while part of me stayed frozen on that kitchen floor. I hired investigators. I drove through neighborhoods at 2 a.m. searching for his old blue Civic. I kept the divorce papers in the drawer, untouched, like a question I refused to answer. Because deep down I knew the man who used to read picture books in silly voices, who once carried me to bed when I fell asleep at my desk after a 20-hour day, who remembered that Theo was afraid of thunder and would sit on the floor beside his bed until the storm passed. That man would never disappear without a reason. And I was going to find out what it was. The weeks that followed blurred into a gray fog I couldn't shake. I kept the brownstone lights on every night like a lighthouse, half believing that if I just left the porch lamp burning, Marcus would see it and come home. I told the nanny we were taking an extended break and paid her 6 months in advance so no one would ask questions. In the office, I smiled through investor calls, signed term sheets worth more money than most people see in a lifetime, and let the newspapers keep calling me the ice queen of private equity. Inside, I was unraveling thread by careful thread. Every evening after the markets closed I drove. Not to anywhere specific, just through the neighborhoods where Marcus might hide. South Boston, Dorchester, the quiet streets of Quincy where teachers could still afford rent. I memorized the makes and colors of cars that looked like his old Civic. I sat in parking lots outside grocery stores at closing time, watching fathers lift small boys into car seats, my chest tightening each time I thought I saw Theo's curly hair. I hired 3 different investigation firms. The first 2 found nothing. The third sent me a single blurry photo taken outside a bus station in Worcester, a man in a gray hoodie carrying a child on his shoulders. The height was right. The way he held the boy's legs was right. But the face was turned away. I stared at that picture until my eyes burned, then paid them to keep looking. At family dinners, my mother never mentioned Marcus by name. She simply set an extra place at the long mahogany table and filled it with one of her carefully chosen prospects, a hedge fund heir, a senator's son, once even the governor's nephew. Each time I sat there in silence, pushing food around my plate while she talked about strengthening alliances and securing the legacy. I felt her eyes on me like a scalpel, waiting for me to crack one night. After the guests had left and the staff cleared the dishes, she cornered me in the library. The fire crackled behind her, throwing long shadows across the bookshelves lined with first editions she had never read. "You're still wearing your wedding ring," she said quietly. I looked down at the simple platinum band Marcus had slipped on my finger 7 years earlier in a small courthouse ceremony she had refused to attend. "I'm not taking it off." She sighed the way she did when a deal was turning sour. "Elena, this melodrama has gone on long enough." He took the boy and left. "Accept it. Sign the papers. You have responsibilities." "I have a son," I answered, voice low, "and a husband who wouldn't disappear without reason." Her laugh was soft, almost pitying. "Reason?" The man taught teenagers about dead presidents for a living. He couldn't even afford the down payment on that brownstone. You gave him everything, and he still ran. That is the reason. I stood up slowly. The firelight caught the edges of her diamond earrings, cold and sharp. "If he ran, then I will find him. And when I do, I want to hear it from his mouth, not yours." She studied me for a long moment, the same calculating look she gave competitors across conference tables. "Be careful what doors you open, daughter. Some truths are heavier than you think." I left without answering, the echo of my footsteps loud in the marble hall. That night I sat on Theo's bedroom floor until dawn, holding the stuffed fox he had left behind, its fur still carrying the faintest trace of his baby shampoo. I whispered the same promise into the quiet dark. I would not stop looking. Not until I understood why the 2 people I loved most had been taken from me in a single rainy night. 7 months passed like that, a slow, aching burn. Boardrooms by day, empty rooms by night, and the constant, gnawing question that never left me. Where were they, and what had my mother really done to drive them away? I thought the ache had settled into something I could live with. Then one gray Thursday morning I drove out to the new waterfront development in East Boston, hard hat under my arm, heels swapped for practical boots. It was supposed to be a routine site visit, check progress on the luxury towers my firm was financing, shake hands with the general contractor, smile for the project photos. I had no idea that before the day was over, I would finally see the face I had been searching for in every crowd. The site smelled of wet concrete and diesel. Rain had started again by the time my car rolled through the chain-link gate, tires crunching over gravel still soft from the night's downpour. I pulled the yellow hard hat lower on my forehead and stepped out into the gray morning, boots sinking slightly into the mud. The project manager, a stocky man named Ruiz, fell into step beside me, rattling off numbers about poured foundations and steel deliveries. I nodded at the right moments, but my mind kept drifting the way I had for months, scanning every cluster of workers, every shadowed face under a hard hat. I had trained myself to look without looking. 7 months of that habit had worn grooves into my thoughts. We walked deeper into the skeletal frame of the first tower. Cranes groaned overhead. Men shouted over the steady beat of generators. Water pooled in the ruts left by heavy equipment. I kept my eyes moving across the site, past welders and sparks, past laborers hauling bundles of rebar that looked heavier than they should. Then my feet stopped moving. Across the open expanse, near a stack of concrete forms, a man bent to lift a long bundle of steel onto his shoulder. His rain jacket was faded and torn at the cuffs. Mud clung to his boots. His hair, longer now and darkened by dampness, fell across his forehead. Even from 40 yards away, even through the curtain of drizzle, I knew the line of his shoulders, the way he planted his feet before straightening. Marcus. My heart slammed against my ribs, so hard I felt it in my throat. The world narrowed to that single figure. He adjusted the load, turning slightly, and for one unbearable second our eyes locked across the mud and machinery. He froze. The bundle of rebar slipped from his shoulder and crashed to the ground with a metallic clang that cut through every other sound. A few workers nearby glanced over, confused. Marcus didn't move to pick it up. He just stood there, rain streaking down his face, staring at me like I was a ghost who had stepped out of the mist. My legs started moving before my mind caught up. Heels no longer mattered. Mud sucked at my boots as I crossed the distance. Closer. Close enough to see the new hollows under his eyes, the faint scar on his left cheekbone that hadn't been there before, the rough redness of his hands gripping nothing now. Marcus. My voice came out raw, louder than I intended. He flinched but didn't run. The project manager called my name somewhere behind me, concerned, but I didn't turn. Nothing existed except the man standing in front of me wearing clothes that smelled of sweat and rain and concrete dust. 7 months of silence, of empty rooms, of nights spent holding a child's stuffed fox crashed over me in a single wave. My hand moved before I could stop it. The slap landed sharp and clean against his cheek, the sound echoing off the half-built walls. His head snapped to the side, but he didn't raise a hand to defend himself. He simply looked back at me, eyes tired and hollow, and full of something that looked too much like shame. Why? The word tore out of me, shaking. Why did you do this to us? Workers had stopped now. Hammers hung still. Conversations died. Everyone watched the woman in the tailored coat confronting the laborer in the mud. You left divorce papers on the counter like I was nothing. I continued, voice rising despite the knot in my throat. You took Theo. You disappeared. I looked for you everywhere. 7 months, Marcus. 7 months of not knowing if you were alive or dead. He swallowed hard, rain dripping from his lashes. Elena not here. Don't tell me where, I snapped. You don't get to decide anything anymore. You lost that right the night you walked out. His shoulders sagged. For a moment, I thought he might turn and disappear into the sight again. Instead, he glanced once at the staring crew, then back at me, voice low and rough from disuse. Please. Tonight. There's a diner off Route 1A, the one with the blue sign. 8 o'clock. I'll explain everything I can. I wanted to scream at him that explanations didn't erase empty beds or a child's missing laugh. But something in his exhausted eyes, the same eyes that once looked at me like I was the only safe place in his world, made me nod once, sharply. 8 o'clock, I said. If you're not there, I swear I'll tear the city apart until I find you again. He gave the smallest nod, then bent slowly to pick up the fallen rebar, muscles straining under the wet jacket. I stood there another few seconds, chest heaving, before turning on my heel and walking back toward my car. Ruiz was waiting, eyes wide with questions he didn't dare ask. Tonight, I would finally hear the truth. And whatever it was, I already knew it would break what little was left of my heart. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and fryer grease. I arrived early, chose the corner booth with its back to the wall, and watched the door like a woman waiting for a verdict. Rain hammered the windows in steady sheets. Each time headlights swept across the glass, my pulse jumped. At 8:07, the bell above the door jingled. Marcus stepped inside, shoulders hunched against the weather. He had changed out of the work clothes into a faded navy hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. His hair was still damp. The scar on his cheek looked darker under the fluorescent lights. He scanned the room once, spotted me, and walked over without hesitation, though every step seemed weighted. He slid into the booth across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The waitress poured 2 coffees without being asked and left us alone. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug to stop them from shaking. "Start talking," I said quietly. "And don't leave anything out." Marcus stared into his coffee, like it might offer courage. When he finally looked up, his eyes were raw. "Your mother came to the house that night," he began, voice low. "The night I left. It was after you had already gone to the investor dinner. She didn't knock. She let herself in with the key you gave her for emergencies. 2 men were with her. Not the kind who smile. Private security, I think. Expensive suits, hard eyes." I felt the air leave my lungs. What did she want? She sat down at our kitchen table like she owned it. Told me I had become a problem. That I was a stain on the Harper name. That the board was already whispering about how my presence made you look weak. Then she laid it out plain. He swallowed. "If I didn't disappear quietly, sign the papers, and never contact you again, she would make sure Theo disappeared into the system. She said she had friends in child services in the courts. She could plant whatever evidence she needed, neglect, instability, even suggestions of something worse. She said a boy like Theo would be easy to lose in foster care. And if I ever told you the truth, her people would know within hours. She made it clear she could reach us anywhere." The mug in my hands suddenly felt ice cold. I set it down before I dropped it. Marcus continued, voice cracking slightly. "She gave me 20 minutes to pack. I woke Theo, told him we were going on an adventure. He was half asleep, clutching that fox. I left the papers on the island because she stood there watching me sign them. I thought if I fought her, I might lose him forever. So I ran. We stayed in cheap motels at first, then with my sister for a while. After that, I moved us every few weeks. I took any cash job I could find, warehouses, kitchens, construction. Anything off the books, so her investigators couldn't track the name on a paycheck." He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out an old flip phone. His thumb moved across the screen, then he slid it across the table. A short audio recording began to play. I recognized my mother's voice instantly. Calm, precise, merciless. "The boy will vanish so thoroughly you'll never find him again. Sign disappear, and keep your mouth shut. If Elena ever learns the truth from you, we'll know. And then the game changes." The recording ended. The diner noise rushed back in, but it felt distant. Marcus watched me carefully. I kept moving between sites so no one would notice the same face too long. I've been at the waterfront job 4 months now. I thought I was invisible. Then I saw you today. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You let me believe you stopped loving us." "Never." His voice broke on the word. "Every single day, I hated myself for what I did to you. But I kept picturing Theo in some stranger's house, scared, calling for us. I couldn't risk it. I thought staying gone was the only way to keep him safe. I sat there absorbing the weight of it all. The betrayal wasn't just abandonment. It was calculated destruction dressed in maternal concern. My mother hadn't simply disapproved. She had weaponized every ounce of her power to carve my family out of my life. And she had almost succeeded. I reached across the table and took Marcus's rough, calloused hand in mine. For the first time in 7 months, it didn't feel like reaching for a ghost. "I need to see our son," I whispered. "He's with my sister in Vermont. Safe. She thinks we're separated, nothing more. Your mother's people never looked that far north." Relief hit me so hard my shoulders trembled. But beneath it, something colder was rising. A fury that had been gathering for 7 long months and now had a target. Marcus must have seen it in my eyes. Elena, whatever you're thinking, be careful. She's dangerous. I know exactly what she is, I said, voice steady now. And I'm done letting her decide what my family looks like. Outside, the rain kept falling, but for the first time since that terrible night the path ahead felt clear. Tomorrow night my mother was hosting her annual gala at the family estate. Investors, relatives, the entire carefully curated world she ruled. Perfect. I would be there. And this time I would not be the one walking away in silence. The chandeliers in my mother's ballroom glittered like knives. Crystal and gold, polished marble floors, the scent of expensive flowers and older money. I walked through the crowd in a simple black dress, no jewelry except the plain platinum wedding band I had never removed. Conversations hushed as I passed. I felt their eyes, curious, speculative, already sensing blood in the water. My mother stood near the grand fireplace, holding court in emerald silk, a glass of champagne in her manicured hand. The man she had always wanted me to marry hovered at her side, smiling the practiced smile of someone who believed the empire was already his. When she saw me approaching, her expression flickered for the briefest second, surprise, then the quick mask of maternal warmth she wore for guests. Elena, darling, you came. She leaned in as if to kiss my cheek. I stopped just out of reach. I have something to say, I told her quietly. My voice carried. The room began to quiet around us, conversations dying one by one until only the string quartet in the corner continued, thin and distant. She laughed softly, a sound meant to dismiss. Now isn't the time for dramatics. We have investors here. It's exactly the time. I turned to face the room. Every face watched. Uncles, cousins, board members. The men and women who had helped build the Harper empire on deals and calculated cruelty. For 7 months, my mother told me my husband left because he wanted money. She called him a beggar. She pushed me to sign divorce papers and forget the life we built together. She paraded suitable replacements in front of me like prizes at an auction. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. My mother's smile tightened. But that wasn't the truth. I continued, voice steady. The truth is she went to our home the night he disappeared. She brought 2 men with her. She sat at our kitchen table and gave him an ultimatum. Disappear, sign the papers, never speak to me again, or she would make our 4-year-old son vanish into the foster system. She said she had the connections to plant evidence, to lose him in paperwork, to make sure we never found him. She threatened his life if he ever told me. Gasps broke the silence. Someone's glass clinked sharply against a table. My mother's face drained of color, but her voice stayed ice calm. That is a vicious lie. You're overwrought, Elena. Grief has clouded your judgment. I pulled the small digital recorder Marcus had given me from my clutch and pressed play. My mother's own voice filled the ballroom, crisp and unmistakable. The boy will vanish so thoroughly you'll never find him again. Sign, disappear, and keep your mouth shut. The recording ended. Dead silence. I looked straight at her. You destroyed my marriage. You made me believe the man I loved had abandoned us. You watched me search, watched me break, and said nothing while you kept rewriting company documents to cut me out if I ever tried to bring him back. Her jaw clenched. I did what was necessary to protect the family legacy. You were throwing it away on a nobody. No, I said. You did what was necessary to protect your control. I reached down and slowly slid the heavy signet ring, the one she had given me on my 30th birthday, the symbol of everything she had built, off my finger. I placed it on the nearest table with a soft click that seemed louder than any shout. You can keep your empire, I told her. I choose my family. I turned and walked toward the tall double doors. Behind me her voice rose, sharp with panic. If you walk out now, there is no coming back. The company, the name, everything stays here. I paused for half a second at the threshold, but did not turn around. Then let it stay. The night air outside was cold and clean. Marcus waited by the car at the end of the long driveway, hands in the pockets of the only decent jacket he still owned. When he saw me coming, uncertainty crossed his face, as if he still half expected me to change my mind. I stopped in front of him. Rain had started again, soft and steady. "Are you ready to go home?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, the exhaustion in his eyes slowly giving way to something warmer. Home, wherever the three of us are together. A small, tentative smile touched his mouth. He opened the passenger door. I slid inside. As we drove away from the glowing mansion, the lights shrinking in the rearview mirror, I felt the weight of 7 months begin to lift. 2 days later, we collected Theo from Marcus's sister in Vermont. The moment he saw us both standing on her porch, he ran straight into my arms, burying his face in my neck with a sob that broke every remaining piece of me and put it back together at once. That night, the three of us slept in a modest rented apartment on the edge of the city. Second-hand furniture, a lumpy couch, windows that rattled when the wind blew. It was nothing like the brownstone or the mansion. It was everything. I lay awake long after Marcus and Theo had fallen asleep, listening to their quiet breathing. The man my mother had called worthless had given up everything to protect our son. He had lived in fear and dirt and silence for 7 months, never once breaking. Real power, I understood now, had never lived in boardrooms or bank accounts. It lived in the quiet choice to stay when everything told you to run. And I had chosen it too.